First and foremost, take note that there's going to be a bit of rainfall ambience in this video. Anyways, on to the review of the Rossi boots. I have a previous through a few different brands of Australian work boots, Chelsea's, or just elastic-sided boots. And of course, with time, the price per performance ratio changes as companies are stuck behind less efficient times, or perhaps that they sell it overseas to a foreign shore that lacks the incentive and focus that the brand name originally did. Rossi Boots, I think, is in a transition phase as a company seeking a new audience with these demands changing times, which is worthy because today I see an extremely high quantity of individuals using slip-ons, flip-flops, clogs, Velcro, Toms, slippers, moccasins, and on it goes. Slip-on boots are also a thing, a great thing indeed. So now, more than ever, Rossi boots and their footwear designs have a home if they can enter the international market with their better designs. And onto the design. And this is specifically on this boot here, not the Redback that I will have some comparison to later. In this day of new fabric technologies and the demand for ultralight pajama weight outerwear, I always appreciate the designs that can keep it simple. Under economic conditions faced since the Great Recession of 2007-2008, the business survivors must strive for the most highly efficient designs as cheap as possible to make for a durable / comfortable as design. Anyways, many boot designers feel incentivized to add waterproof, comfortable, slip-on, easy break-in liners too. That footwear adds too much to the design cost and usually is at the expense of using thinner leather built quality. And again, cheaper doesn't necessarily mean making it in China, but what it does mean is making as few manufacturing processes as possible so the design is durable because it is simple and because there's not as much expense cost in adding extra things like toe caps or floral designs, etc. So, like the Redback design that I showed in the beginning, the black boot, there isn't any fancy liner gimmicks with thinner leather to trap water between the leather and the Gore-Tex layers that they advertise as the technology, rotting the leather from within as it gets wet and stuck. One of my bigger complaints with the Redback design was its oval, egg-shaped toe design. And you might have seen that in the beginning, but here it's just... This one's looks like a square toe, and as you can see, this one perhaps is more of a egg-shaped design. And just if you follow the natural contour of the foot, of the big toe, this should be a little bit longer out here and around, so the big toe is not getting pushed in and causing a lifetime amount of problems. And webcam, please quit doing that. One of my bigger complaints was its oval egg-shaped toe design instead of a square or design that follows the natural contour of the foot's natural shape. In general, there is much less to secure the foot to the footbed in a slip-on such as this, and without the correct shape and size fitting, your foot can take a brunt of the damage. And I could say this, and basically if the design is too big, your foot is just sliding all over the place because there's nothing to secure it. And if it's too short, again, you have what I said earlier, where your toes are getting shoved into there and being malformed into this design of a club. Usually if you size up, like I said, the leather and elastic job of holding the foot will fail and said foot will flop all over the boot with little support. In this case though, using the correct sizing, the big toe has slightly more room than in the Redback oval design. Added in sizing up, unlike Redback or Blundstone, using standard Australian hole sizing, where the hole number is the boot size and the half is the same length as its respective hole number size, but for a wider fit. Rossi boots utilizes a half size interval differences like you would expect in the US. This makes a marked difference in finding the exact fit for your foot. If you can try Rossi boots on, and it is worth noting that most Rossi websites show differences between the Australian and the US sizing as a 1.5 increment difference from the Australian standard to American's men's sizing. For example, and if that doesn't make any sense, that should, hopefully, an Australian size 7, such as this one here, will fit an 8.5 men's US size. Redbacks are generally suggested as a one whole size difference between US to Australian, so your mileage may vary for general Australian to US sizing. Again, this one recommends if you are a size 8.5 men's US, you would buy the Australian 7, so you have a 1.5 size difference. Whereas with the Redbacks, I think it's a 1-to-1, so if you're an 8.5, you would go technically to 7.5. But again, the problem with the Redbacks and the Blundstones is that if you purchase those, you'd have to go down to the whole size. So I'd have to go to the same thing, 7 Australian, because the 7.5 Australian sizing would be basically a wide fit for size 8 US. So again, the only difference between the half size and their whole size of the same general number is a D width or an E width if you are using the US sizing. And again, specifically from Australian to men's, because I don't think the Australian, European Union, or the UK has a difference between, I think it's all unisex, whereas the US is not. And just to note, I believe the Australian sizes are equal to UK sizes. I'm going to make a leap of faith here since Doc Martin also uses whole sizing, that whole sizing boots without the half incremental differences is rubbish. Particularly with poor, uncomfortable footwear designs often seen today, countries using whole sizes need to look to the US sizing or the more recent EU sizing, European Union. And it is no wonder that in the US, that army physician Dr. Munson came up with this evolutionary footwear last 100 years ago, studying poor footwear designs from many lousy European military and boot designs in the early 1900s, using the first x-rays, in fact. Anyways, back on topic. The boot's balance is not easy to describe. Each last or a plastic/wood foot shape has a boot built around it, so it's just shoved in and then they built the boot around it. Typically, this is in traditional shoemaking. But even something like this, you're going to have some sort of a foot design to build the boot around, I would hope. Unless you're some sort of Japanese contortionist deforming the foot shape. But anyways, the thing is that one could design a boot last to the shape of a hypothetical human crow foot. So it isn't usually ergonomic, and style often takes precedence. Furthermore, the tilt of the boot and the lift of the heel, arch, and footbed can tilt the foot's weight to a specific part of the foot. Again, if we look at the side here, if there's too much here or here and it's not balanced in the length or the height perhaps, then you're going to be putting excessive weight in one spot, and then the boot's balance is going to be perturbed. And again, it just depends on the specific goals, whether it's running, working, standing, etc. What has been discovered is that barefoot running, as we evolved into when we did not wear shoes, ran from the ball of the foot here to the heel, and then the muscles lifted the foot up again where the muscles up here, using the many muscles found within that part of the foot. The heel, back here, has no muscles, and most footwear with any heel lifted up will force the wearer to strike on the heel here, and that's called a heel strike. A strike like such without cushion causes vibrations to be sent up through the bones, up to the knee, spine, neck, and you get the point. The balance can adjust how one stands and their own locomotion when wearing them. For these boots, they sit in a comfortable area between the footbed here and the heel. Anyways, my point there is that it distributes the weight relatively easily, whereas a boot that is not very well designed might put excess pressure in the heel and the arch, and therefore you get discomfort after a long day at work. It has the right amount of lifts in each area, especially compared to the other polyurethane footwear that I've used. And while I've tried on another pair of their main boot outsole, I can't remember its name, I found the heel on those far too tall here, and the footbed here was much too thin. I really like the balance of this design though. My foot feels worked out but not abused at the end of the day, and unlike most boots, I find running in them more natural. Again, different than most boot designs. I feel incentivized to run in locomotion with them compared to most other boots, and suffice to say, the Enigma sole, which is what this is called, is a winner. Onto materials. The leather, I'm going to actually change this out with the Redback here. The leather here is extremely thick, in comparison especially. It's thick, or it's extremely nice, and it's thick, and thanks to that, it does not require some sort of supporting liner, among other things, to keep its stout shape. Again, just it's you can tell from both of these designs that that's the rough end of the leather. It's unlined. The thicker leather feels like something that has continued to use from their boot designs from many decades ago, since it's a 100-year-old company. And this is particularly when you had some sort of a stitched on outsole instead of something that was just bonded or glued on. It feels more reminiscent, the leather quality, of a time when people had their boots resoled at a cobbler rather than just threw them away. The leather is so thick that you will definitely need to break these in. And with my thickest socks, I had the bony area of the top of my arch pinched on one foot here. If the material of my sock clumped there, as you would expect in a boot that requires elastic and leather to keep the foot in place without lacing. I'm not a fan though of the rear pull tab here. Trousers will often catch them between the Achilles and the pull tab, and it just requires adjustment, certainly just for appearance's sake. And usually something like this where they use nylon on the back, it's not so much of a problem. However, I am not willing to hold this against Rossi, since in its design it uses one less part, since it's an all-in-one heel tab design. Instead of using the nylon tab like you could see here. The outsole I do really like. This aids in the balance of the boot, as comfortable, and in comparison it seems extremely durable. The Redback boot seems like a tennis shoe outsole. Here's the Redback boot here with its spongy flexibility. I like the flat appearance of the outsole to the protruded center and the Redback, and which is very prone to picking up debris. Here, there's plenty of depth there to grab onto rocks and end up just scratching the ground that you're walking on, as well as when you're mowing the lawn, etc. It'll clump in there. But again, this one, the Redback here, feels much more spongy, whereas this feels much more dense. But I like the support here, whereas I feel like the Redback here, sometimes when I'm wearing it in a long day, it tends to, the weight clumps around the heel to midsole, and sort of feels like it's pushing too much down and causing arch pain. I like the flat appearance of the outsole to the protruded center and the Redback, which is very prone to picking up debris, as I just said. The Redback here is also a much easier break-in, and it definitely feels more slipper-like. And I think I just explained that in how it feels when you're wearing it. My one material qualm I've had with Rossi boots here is I've tried one on with their Insole, the other pair I mentioned earlier of Rossi boots. I like the Redback boots insole because it is a thin foam piece with perforation. And I'll show that here. So again, it's just a thin piece of foam, and there's all these holes cut out on the bottom here to allow it to breathe. Because it is a thin piece with perforation cut into it for breathability. It's not exactly the best foam fit, but it supports where it needs to and molds to the sole. Son of a gun. The Rossi boot, in contrast, is like a memory foam bed. And for any that have tested that type, the hype for the highest tech foams in a bed, like memory foam, it's akin to sleeping in African weather. Like many synthetic materials, the breathability is too much and not there. With fat synthetic polyurethane, nitrile plastic, etc., any type of synthetic outsole, it's a given that the outsole will react harshly to weather. If it's cold, your foot will not be able to generate much heat within the confines because of these materials. The memory foam here, though, will generate excessive amounts of heat in the summer and accomplish nothing in the winter. I will say the insole here for the Enigma boot, not the other Rossi boot that I tried, is not as bad to the other one. Again, I think this one just uses some form of memory foam here. It is prone to trapping heat, like I said. But again, it's not as bad. But for an all-purpose work boot, I would expect more. I don't expect it out of winter. Because again, if you're, like I just said, these synthetic materials tend to get frozen solid feeling when you're in that type of negative weather. But during the summer, it can be problematic, which I find funny because it's an Australian work boot in their weather. Alright, quality control and shipping. Here's where the good news distorts into a sour. And let me note that I cannot exact the specific fault in the retailer or the manufacturer. If it was not for seeing some other Rossi boots that, in my experience with loose stitching and among other lack of quality control, just stitching, up here on the outside, I would likely just suggest that it was the retailer that I bought it from, and it was their fault for storing the boots too long without a sale, leading to the process of hydrolysis, which I went more into the Redback video. As the product sits and decays, and the outsole bond crumbles apart with the upper. So here you have the upper, and here you have the outsole, and the bond starts to flake off. And again, here, I think it's the same on the Redback boots. You have this, I think both of these are called a TPU. Now I know with Rossi's other boots they use something called nitrile, which I think is a synthetic latex. But I think this one is a TPU, which is thermoplastic polyurethane, I believe. And it's bonded to polyurethane, the midsole here, which is again bonded to the upper, the leather here. Where was I at? So basically the process of hydrolysis, as the product sits and decays and the outsole bond crumbles, you usually hear where the polyurethane is with the upper, and then you're losing your sole as it peels off. By the way, this is on many sports athletic shoes, Nikes and whatnot, because polyurethane is incredibly lightweight, but if you leave it for too many months or years, it crumbles. People go back to their boots and are like, wow, this is the worst brand I've ever bought when the thing's crumbling, and they're like, I only used it one day. Rossi boots may need to discuss with their distributors in this case, particularly internationally, where the brand is less known and bought on efficient product distribution. And it's specifically with this right one here. I hope that I can actually, the right one here, I can illuminate this. There we go. So as you can see there, and it's not as significant, it's more significant in person than it is in camera, but that part of that boot, oh come on you bastard, is starting to peel off from the inside here. My particular pair has, and there's another part. Now see, here's the thing where it's tough to find out if the bond is breaking. There's along this line here, particularly right here where the leather meets, you can see that flake of polyurethane. You can see it here too. That's just flaked off. That's not actually part of the bond. But here it's definitely where the bond is starting to break, and I definitely worry in the next few months that it will get worse. So my particular pair has much less of a year in use, and I can already see openings between the upper here and then the lower. For all the glory that the better design and material does, a boot with a broken bond is not going to last long. I will in the future bring this up with Rossi and see what they are willing to do. But in the meantime, I may use some barge cement, which I think you can find at something like Home Depot. to seal what I can in that broken bond back up. This is why some of these companies require a 1-year warranty, though, because it is not the consumer's fault if the product uses something like polyurethane that breaks down with disuse as it sits in the warehouse too long. Once the consumer owns it and stores it for an excess amount of time, like over a year, but I would be concerned about not wearing my boots for a month, then finds the bond breaking down. It is the consumer's responsibility in that case, even if they were unaware of the process. And that's why I'm showing you in this video, and it's incredibly important for any polyurethane type boot, like even Nikes or etc., that you wear them regularly. I would recommend at least weekly, just because what happens is the process of hydrolysis is the bond starts to break with disuse. Thus, it is imperative that Rossi doubles down on the efficient distribution internationally, else products will sit in warehouses too long and ultimately negatively influence their brand. I would suggest that they try to sell through websites with higher frequencies of consumers willing to invest their capital in your product to keep the stock moving along. I'm not going to mention any websites just for promoting anything, but I think most people would know what websites get higher frequencies of consumers. Onto the pricing section. As the consumer, I restate that you are particular about where you are buying the boots from. A shop that isn't knowledgeable about the effects of hydrolysis during the stock storage or a shop that doesn't sell enough of that specific boot to constantly justify fresh new stock, where the outsole atoms have not begun to lose their bond to the respective boot, should be considered when purchasing any pair of polyurethane footwear, which is a significant amount of footwear today. As I mentioned earlier, this means that you can purchase a pair direct from Australia and likely receive stock that is moving through with a higher frequency and less susceptible to hydrolysis, except you will probably pay more for the individual shipping from Australia to your country. A tip you and retailers shipping internationally may want to do is ship the footwear without the box to save on shipping costs. Albeit some people need their presentation and are willing to pay for that extra box and store and shipping. But I can tell you right now, unless they rip the package, it's not going to destroy the footwear. Okay, well maybe if it gets crushed by, 1,000-pound weight. Redback sells more boots to the United States, so they have more options that I can see in purchasing the Redback boots online. While I don't know what the Rossi or Redback's native Australian standard pricing is, I usually see Rossi boots costing $20 to $50 US dollars more than Redbacks. With this in mind, I see Rossi and Redbacks as equals in terms of their value, increasing and getting a little bit more. And I think, here, I'll go over a couple. With the Redback boots, like I said, you get this one. With the Rossi, you get thicker leather. You can see it's more stout and it's less prone to flexing. Albeit this one has been worn for more than a year. These had almost no break-in. But for that 20 to 50 extra US dollars, you get, again, the nicer leather. Where is that? You get just sort of small details. Oh boy, this is going to be tough. Like, as you can see here, the elastic inside here is cut out, whereas something like the Redback is just going to be a square cut. Again, it saves time, it saves money with less processes to just use a square cutout, but you get a little bit more with it. You get the leather pull tab if that's your thing. Like I said before, I think the Rossi boot, it does feel more like a nitrile, whereas this feels more just like a really nice tennis shoe. But this does feel like it's going to hold up longer. Again, but if that bond breaks, you still lose at the end. The elastane or the nylon, or the spandex, whatever it's called, here, the stretchy part holds up. It does feel like it is made of a stronger quality there. So I think for about 20 to 50, you do get more. And then you get that better design that I like here with the big toe, not crunching up into the side there. But it's to each their own. And like I said, that's why I consider them equals. And I'd probably consider them both a 4 stars, except that that big problem with the bond breaking, which I think in that case, other than what I would say about being equals in terms of price differences, I think the Rossi I would knock down to about a 3 stars out of 5 instead. But in conclusion, this is my favorite footwear design, and I do prefer it to the better value Redback boot, as I've shown here. The balance of the boot design rests my foot's weight close to my arch instead of resting back on the pure bone that is my heel. The best boot design executed will not labor the foot, but allow the muscles to feel like that they are stretching and to do their own footwork instead of the bones aching to finish the task. And accordingly, while the comfort is better, the toe design is more ergonomic towards the shape of the foot with the Rossi boots. You get the half sizes as opposed to the Redback or Blundstone, and the leather and sole is of a higher quality. You will pay extra, and the quality control with the Rossi boots is suspect at this time for me at this review. Since Rossi is still owned by the same family legacy, I want them to survive as a company, and as such, hope they are willing to take the measures to continue innovating and selling through foreign shores, such as the US. Redback Boots has been able to amass a quantity and quality of reviews that speaks for its product on places like Amazon that I believe Rossi Boots could also compete within if they only put their product more on such websites. This is a century-old company where 99% of their competition is likely defunct, gone, and forgotten from when they started over 100 years ago. To continue as such in an ever-changing industry such as footwear design, one must be a survivor to last 100 years. And I can see through their Australian website that they have quite a variety of products intending to fulfill the needs of a wide variety of industries. Like Redback 2, instead of having 100 different outsoles, they are committed to just using a few, meeting these many needs. Hopefully, with some exposure and change too, they can continue to contribute to this large variety in the most efficient way possible. This type of footwear has gone from a stitched-on soling, usually leather, to using rubbers, to using polyurethane as well, an inherently flawed product since its bond deteriorates without use. A switch from getting foot support and durability from a dense material like leather into using some sort of air cushioning akin to Doc Martens, or through the foam-like materials here, polyurethane. There has only been so much time to test out new designs and find measures of success in the footwear industry that are consistent, and I suspect that the product development will continue for a long while, and I'm talking about in general with the footwear industry, particularly something like what I've reviewed here with the Australian boots. Incentivizing new design down the road from these many companies. So basically my point here is that in the next 10 years, no one might be using... these designs may be old and this review might be pointless, but I would suggest that these designs will continue to change for the better or perhaps the worse as new materials are introduced or just more comfortable footwear designs are used. And that's, something like the white/Knicks boots has, to me, a perfection of comfort in using a leather product, and I think something like this is still in its infancy in comparison. And just so you know, of course, no, I am not sponsored by any of the companies mentioned today. And just so you know, also, do not forget that the same cobbler that resoles Redback boots in the United States should be able to resole your Rossi boots if you wish to extend the life of the uppers. I will put that link in the description. But I don't... Some people, just so you know, the resole is almost the price of the boots. I think they will bond or glue some form of a Vibram on there. And just something else I forgot to mention, that the Redback boot, I think, also has more colors for those that really need their style enhancement. I think Rossi boots only offers like one or two. I don't really care. But the other thing too, I had some questions on the last video for the Redback, and if you are going to, I mean, the thing is, I don't have like a hate trip against Blundstone, but I think for its price, it tends to be more expensive than Redback. I mean, even though that Blundstone is now made in China or Taiwan, I can't remember. It's no longer made in Australia. And it's probably roughly the same price as the Rossi boots. My first thought is, why not just go with, something that's as well made, if not better made, than Blundstone. And who knows? I've had problems with hydrolysis in the receiving very consistently with the Blundstones that I have tried on. But my thing is that if I was going to buy a pair of Australian work boots in another country, made in China, Taiwan, Vietnam, etc., just countries that are not used to making Australian work boots or don't have a history or culture of designing them and perfecting it, there's designs I can get for about 40 or 50 bucks for another pair of Australian work boots other than this, that I would suggest would be comparable to Blundstone anyways. So if we're doing market competition, I might as well just buy the Chinese made equivalent that's made for at least half the price because it doesn't have the brand name. And again, I will probably link that Chinese pair in the description. Might not fit the stylistas out there, the fashionistas, but anywho, cheers, big ears.